Hi everyone, welcome to the Books and Mortar podcast with me, your host Razia, where we talk about the books that build us. I know that it's been a while since I've posted an episode, but sometimes life takes over. But here I am. And the next one that I've got for you is Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer. Did you know that you pronounce his name Eoin? Eoin. I think it's an Irish name. But that can get away from you, or it could be a potentially embarrassing situation. So Artemis Fowl, right? This is the first time that I'm reading Artemis Fowl. It's a middle grade book, and he's 12 years old when the series starts. And I have to tell you that I am in this for the long haul. Okay. It's all 8 books, and it fascinates me because he'll be 20 years old by then, right? And I'm interested to see if the writing changes in any way, like the Harry Potter books. The writing does mature as Harry gets older. So these books are quite short, and the first one is it's called Artemis Fowl, right? So let me read you a synopsis of book 1. So it goes like this. From a strikingly original voice in fiction comes the story of Artemis Fowl, a very unusual hero. Artemis combines the astuteness of Sherlock Holmes with the sang-froid of James Bond and the attitude of Attila the Hun. But even Artemis doesn't know what he's taken on when he kidnaps a fairy, Captain Holly Short of Leprechaun Unit. These aren't the fairies of bedtime stories. These fairies are armed and they're dangerous. Artemis thinks he's got them just where he wants them, but then they stop playing by the rules. Full of unexpected twists and turns, Artemis Fowl opens up a riveting world of magic, mystery, and humor. It sounds like fun, doesn't it? And it was. I really enjoyed this quick read, and I'm quite keen to share it with you. And I think that this one is quite a good way to perhaps introduce young boys to reading, which we know is like a monumentous task. And Artemis Fowl, it's full of adventure, and it's age appropriate for your middle graders, which is usually age 9 to 12. So the story opens in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, where Artemis Fowl and his butler, named Butler, who is armed to the nines, is looking for a fairy, right? Specifically a sprite, who is going to give him a copy of the book. And this is how he gets it. If you know about the book, human, she said slowly, fighting the numbing effects of the whiskey, then you know about the magic I have in my fist. I can kill you with a snap of my fingers. Artemis shrugged. I think not. Look at you. You are near dead. The rice wine has dulled your senses, reduced to healing warts. Pathetic. I'm here to save you in return for the book. What could a human want with our book? That is no concern of yours. All you need to know are your options. The sprite's pointed ears quivered. Options? 1. You refuse to give us the book and we go home, leaving you to rot in the sewer. Yes, said the fairy. I choose this option. Oh, no, don't be so eager. If we leave without the book, you'll be dead in a day. A day? A day? The healer laughed. I will outlive you by a century. Even fairies tethered to the human realm can survive the ages. Not with half a pint of holy water inside them, said Artemis, tapping the now empty whiskey bottle. The fairy blanched, then screamed, a high, keening, horrible sound. Holy water? You have murdered me, human. True, admitted Artemis. It should start to burn any minute now. The fairy poked her stomach tentatively. The second option? Listening now, are we? Very well then. Option 2. You give me the book for 30 minutes only. Then I return your magic to you. The sprite's jaw dropped. Return my magic? Not possible. Oh, but it is. I have in my possession 2 amples. 1, a vial of spring water from the fairy well 60 meters below the ring of Tara, possibly the most magical place on earth. This will counteract the holy water. And the other? The other is a little shot of man-made magic, a virus that feeds on alcohol mixed with a growth reagent. It will flush every drop of rice wine from your body, remove the dependence, and even bolster your failing liver. It will be messy, but after a day you'll be zipping around as though you were 1,000 years old again. The sprite licked her lips. To be able to rejoin the people? Tempting. How do I know to trust you, human? You have tricked me once already. Good point. Here's the deal. I give you the water on faith. Then, after I've had a look at the book, you get the booster. Take it or leave it. The fairy considered. She thrust out her wrist. I take it. I thought you might. Butler. The giant manservant unwrapped a soft velcroed case containing a syringe gun and 2 vials. He loaded the clear one, shooting it into the sprite's clammy arm. The fairy stiffened momentarily, then relaxed. Strong magic, she breathed. Yes, but not as strong as your own will be when I give you the second injection. Now, the book. The sprite reached into the folds of her filthy robe, rummaging for an age. Artemis held his breath. This was it. Soon, the Fowls would be great again. A new empire would rise with Artemis Fowl II at its head. She opened her knobbly fingers. Lying in her palm was a tiny golden volume the size of a matchbox. Here, human, 30 of your minutes, no more. Butler took the tiny tome reverentially. The bodyguard activated a compact digital camera and began photographing each wafer-thin page of the book. The process took several minutes. When he was finished, the entire volume was stored on the camera's chip. Artemis preferred not to take chances with the information. Airport security equipment had been known to wipe many a vital disk. So he instructed his aide to transfer the file to his portable phone and from there email it to Fowler Manor in Dublin. Before the 30 minutes were up, the file containing every symbol in the fairy book was sitting safely in the Fowl server. Artemis returned the tiny volume to its owner. Nice doing business with you. So you can see that he's not your everyday tween, right? So Butler comes from a family who have served the Fowls for centuries, and he'd been with Artemis since he was born. And they've become friends. Indeed, the only friend that Artemis has. And when you're like Artemis, I imagine that it's difficult to connect with other kids your age, right? So why does he want the book? The answer, in fact, is quite simple. Gold. The book is like the fairy Bible, right? It contains their history and the laws by which they live, but it's written in Gnomish, which is not a human language. But Artemis, of course, has found a way to translate it. So off they go home, right? Artemis's mother, Angeline Fowl, has been in a depressive state for about a year. She hardly comes out of her bedroom, and she sleeps all day. She also talks to Artemis's father, who has been missing and believed dead for a year. So needless to say, she doesn't give Artemis much attention, and he misses both his parents. And what hurts him most is that his mother doesn't always recognize him. And every day he hopes that she will be better, but it hasn't happened yet. But he also knows that when she gets better, his freedom will be severely restricted again, and he'd likely have to go back to school. So no more spearheading criminal enterprises. And then also in the house is Butler's younger sister, Juliet, and she is very into wrestling, which is apparently normal for a butler. But after some challenges, right, Artemis manages now to translate the book, the Gnomish text of the book. The Fowls have always been involved in criminal activity, right? They tried to go straight, figured it didn't suit them, and then they went back to their criminal ways. And sadly, Artemis's father had thrown everything into jeopardy when he encroached on the Russian mafia's territory, and they launched a missile into his ship on which he was on board with Butler's uncle, and it exploded. And in spite of this, though, Artemis believed that his father was alive and still out there somewhere. The Fowls were not left penniless, though. They were no longer billionaires, and Artemis wanted to fix this, and he planned to get the gold from the fairies. They're not like destitute, but they're no longer billionaires. But yeah, okay. So introducing the elf Holly Short. Nut brown skin, cropped auburn hair, and hazel eyes. A captain in the LEP, the Lower Elements Police, under Commander Julius Root, a.k.a. Beetroot, on account of his reddish complexion, right? So Holly was the first female officer to enter the recon unit, LEP Recon, or LEP Recon, a highly dangerous unit with high fatality rates, and at this point Holly was running low on her magic. She needed to perform the ritual before she ran out completely. So something to know about the fairies, right, is that they live underground. And this is where she goes to do the ritual. Finally, the coast loomed ahead of her. The old country, Iriu, the land where time began, the most magical place on the planet. It was here, 10,000 years ago, that the ancient fairy race, the Didanan, had battled against the demon Fomorians, carving the famous Giant's Causeway with the strength of their magical blasts. It was here that the Leah Vale stood, the rock at the center of the universe, where the fairy kings and later the human Ardri were crowned. It was also here, unfortunately, that the mud people were most in tune with magic, which resulted in a far higher people sighting rate than you got anywhere else on the planet. Thankfully, the rest of the world assumed that the Irish were crazy, a theory that the Irish themselves did nothing to debunk. They had somehow got it into their heads that each fairy lugged around a pot of gold with them wherever they went. While it was true that LEP had a ransom fund because of its officers' high-risk occupation, no human had ever taken a chunk of it yet. This didn't stop the Irish population in general from skulking around rainbows hoping to win the supernatural lottery. But in spite of that, if there was one race the people felt an affinity for, it was the Irish. Perhaps it was their eccentricity, perhaps their dedication to the Craig, as they called it, and if the people were actually related to humans, as another theory had it, odds on it was the Emerald Isle where it started. So fairies call humans the mud people. Let's face it, true. We're not very nice. Another part of Holly's circle is Foley, the centaur. He works in ops and he's the tech guy. He's super paranoid that humans are trying to read his mind, so he wears a tinfoil hat at all times. Constant vigilance, right? So on this evening, when Holly goes to perform the ritual, she doesn't realize that there are two people laying in wait, Artemis and Butler. They've been doing this for several nights already, but finally their luck was about to change. Something whizzed over Holly's head, something that glinted in the starlight. Holly had enough on-the-job experience to realize that she was under fire and immediately curled her elfin frame into a ball, minimizing the target. She drew her pistol, rolling towards the shelter of the tree trunk. Her brain scrambled for possibilities. Who could be shooting at her and why? Something was waiting beside the tree, something roughly the size of a mountain, but considerably more mobile. Nice pea shooter, grinned the figure, smothering Holly's gun hand in a turnip-sized fist. I don't suppose you would consider peaceful surrender, said a cold voice behind her. Holly turned, elbows raised for combat. No, sighed the boy melodramatically. I suppose not. Holly put on her best brave face. Stay back, human. You don't know what you're dealing with. The boy laughed. I believe, Fairy, that you are the one unfamiliar with the facts. Fairy? He knew she was a fairy. I have magic, mudworm, enough to turn you and your gorilla into pig droppings. The boy took a step closer. Brave words, miss, but lies nonetheless. If, as you say, you had magic, you would have no doubt used it by now. No, I suspect that you've gone too long without the ritual and you are here to replenish your powers. Holly was dumbfounded. There was a human before her, casually spouting sacred secrets. This was disastrous, catastrophic. It could mean the end of generations of peace. If the humans were aware of a fairy subculture, it was only a matter of time before the two species went to war. She must do something, and there's only one weapon left in her arsenal. The mesmer is the lowest form of magic and requires only a trickle of power. There are even certain humans with a bent for the talent. It is within the ability of even the most drained fairy to put a complete mind kibosh on any human alive. Holly summoned the final dribble of magic from the base of her skull. Human, she intoned, her voice suddenly resonating with bass tones. Your will is mine. Artemis smiled, safe behind his mirrored lenses. I doubt it, he said, and nodded curtly. Holly felt the dart puncture the suit's toughened material, depositing its load of curare and succinylcholine chloride-based tranquilizer into her shoulder. The world instantly dissolved into a series of technicolored bubbles, and, try as she might, Holly couldn't seem to hold on to more than one thought. And that thought was, how did they know? It spiraled around her head as she sank into unconsciousness. How did they know? How did they know? How did they? Artemis saw the pain in the creature's eyes as the hollow hypodermic plunged into her body, and for a moment he experienced misgivings. A female. He hadn't expected that. A female, like Juliet or Mother. Then the moment passed and he was himself again. Good shooting, he said, bending to study their prisoner. Definitely a girl. Pretty too, in a pointy sort of way. So not the best way for them to meet, I'd say, but the moment this happens, right, Foley realizes something is wrong and he alerts Commander Root. They've lost connection with Holly's comms, so they're able to listen into the conversation Artemis, Holly and Butler has before they knock her out, and so they know that she was kidnapped. And for a mission this important, Commander Root himself will be heading up a search and rescue party. So Commander Root tracks Holly's located device, but of course Artemis and Butler don't take the device with them. They needed to create a distraction, so they go to the docks and they find a ship. When Commander Root gets there expecting to find Holly, he finds Artemis. Or his voice, anyway. Ah, said a familiar voice, we have a visitor. Root dropped to one knee, leveling the handgun at the voice's source. Come to rescue your missing officer, no doubt. The commander blinked a bead of sweat from his eye. Sweat at this temperature? Well, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. The voice was tinny, artificial, amplified. Root checked his locator for life signs. There were none. Not in this chamber at any rate. He was being monitored somehow. Was there a camera here somewhere, concealed in the maze of overhead plumbing that could penetrate the fairy shield? Where are you? Show yourself! The human chuckled. It echoed unnaturally around the vast hold. Oh no, not yet, my fairy friend. But soon enough. And believe me, when I do, you'll wish I hadn't. Root followed the voice. Keep the human talking. What do you want? What do I want? Again, you will know soon enough. There was a low crate in the center of the hold. On it sat an attaché case. The case was open. Why bring me here at all? Root poked the case with his pistol. Nothing happened. I brought you here for a demonstration. The commander leaned over the open container. Inside, in snug foam packing, were a flat vacuum-packed package and a triple-band VHP transmitter. Resting on top was Holly's locator. Root groaned. Holly wouldn't willingly give up her equipment. No LAP officer would. What sort of demonstration, you demented freak? Again that cold chuckle. A demonstration of my utter commitment to my goals. Root should have started to worry about his own health then, but he was too busy worrying about Holly's. If you've harmed one tip of my officer's pointy ears, your officer. Oh, we have management. How privileged. All the better to make my point. Alarm bells went off in Root's head. Your point? The voice emanating from the aluminium speaker grid was as serious as nuclear winter. My point, little fairy man, is that I am not someone to be trifled with. Now, if you would please observe the package. The commander duly observed. It was a nondescript enough shape, flat like a slab of putty, or... Oh no, beneath the sealant, a red light flicked on. Fly, little fairy, said the voice, and tell your friends Artemis Fowl II says hello. Checkmate, Commander, checkmate. Artemis Fowl is nothing if not committed. So Artemis pays Holly a visit, like in her cell, for lack of a better word. She's fascinated and horrified at the same time that he knows so much about fairies and the rules of their world. Like, for example, he knows that while she's in his house, she has to follow his rules. And not just that, he seems to be able to read Gnomish as well. And when she asks how he knows everything, he tells her that he injected her with sodium pentothal, a truth serum. He didn't really do this, but he doesn't want to tell her that he has a copy of the book. Interestingly, he feels guilty for lying to her because he realizes that it might be causing her like extreme guilt and pain to think that she had sold out her people. And then he starts questioning himself about just how far he's willing to go for this gold, which is out of character for him. And in the meantime, Foley has hacked into Interpol. We need more secure systems. And he's found the file on the Fowl family and all of the crimes they've been committing like for centuries. And this is how he finds the location of Fowl Manor. But something bothers Foley though, and he tells Commander Root about it because he can't understand why Artemis told them who he is. He figures that as clever as Artemis seems to be, he must have known that they would be able to find him if they knew who he was. But Commander Root shrugs it off. But Foley is still concerned. So Root and his team make it to Fowl Manor using a map that Foley, to use his words, had idiot-proofed. And once they're there, Lieutenant Gudgeon asks Root what they should do. So he wants to set off a bomb, right, called Blue Rinse. And this is a biological bomb used by the police force. It only destroys living tissue, leaving the landscape unchanged, so it wouldn't look as though there had been an explosion. The problem is, though, is that it would likely take out Holly, too. But Gudgeon doesn't seem to be very upset by this. Like, he says that keeping the fairy's secret from the humans is more important than the life of a single fairy, which, makes Root mad. But of course, Artemis is aware of their arrival, right? He had a new camera installed that would be able to penetrate the fairy shield. Clever boy. He sends Butler out to deal with them, but he tells him just to frighten them off and to not actually kill them, right? And there you see another moment of softness from him. So Butler takes out a few of them, but he feels sorry for them, right? Because they're so small. But then Corporal Grub hits him in the chest with a couple of electrodes, and he doesn't feel sorry for them anymore. So once they're all down, Butler picks up Corporal Grub and tells him to tell his commander that they want a negotiator, someone who can make decisions. So Foley and Commander Root are busy setting up a time stop, right? Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a device that stops time. So they're going to stop time in and around Fowl Manor. And luckily, it's an isolated area with a definite boundary, right? So honestly, it was almost as though Artemis wanted them to stop time, which makes Foley hesitate. And there's still something about Artemis that's bothering him, right? But Commander Root insists that he activate the time stop, so that's what Foley does. And for the next 8 hours over Fowl Manor, time will stand still. In this time, Gudgeon will be preparing the biobomb while Root gets Holly out. Or he tries to, anyway. If he doesn't manage it, though, every living thing will be obliterated, himself and Holly included. Okay, so this is how it goes, right? Artemis's watch had stopped. It was as though Greenwich wasn't there anymore. Or perhaps, mewed Artemis, we're the ones who have disappeared. He checked CNN. It had frozen. A picture of Riz Khan jittered slightly on the screen. Artemis could not hold back a satisfied smile. They had done it, just like the book said. The LEP had stopped time, all according to plan. Time to check out a theory. Artemis wheeled over to the monitor bank and punched up the MAM cam on the 70-centimeter main monitor. Angeline Fowl was no longer on the chaise lounge. Artemis panned around the room. It was empty. His mother had gone, disappeared. His smile widened. Perfect, just as he'd suspected. What's that about? But Foley was right, though, right? They seemed to be playing right into Artemis's hands. So Root gets to the house, Artemis lets him in, and they begin negotiations. So Artemis tells him that he only wants one thing, 1 ton of 24-karat gold in small, unmarked ingots. Root sat forward in his chair. Don't you see? Your position is untenable. Either you give us back Captain Short, or we will be forced to kill you all. There is no middle ground. We don't negotiate. Not really. I'm just here to explain the facts to you. Artemis smiled his vampire smile. Oh? But you will negotiate with me, Commander. Oh, really? What makes you so special? I am special, because I know how to escape the time field. Impossible, snorted Root. Can't be done. Oh, yes, it can. Trust me, I haven't been wrong yet. Root tore off the top page, folding it into his pocket. I'll have to think about this. Take your time. We have 7.5 hours. Then it's time up for everybody. Root said nothing for a long while, tapping his nails on the tabletop. He took a breath to speak, then changed his mind and stood abruptly. We'll be in touch. Don't worry, I'll see myself out. Artemis pushed his chair back. You do that. But remember this, none of your race has permission to enter here while I am alive. At this point, Root decides that it's time to employ a new character into his rescue team, right? A dwarf by the name of Mulch Diggins. Mulch is a kleptomaniac, and he's well known to the LEP. So Mulch has made his way in life by breaking into people's homes, by tunneling in. And since he didn't have permission to enter their homes, he'd lost his magic, but it didn't seem to bother him because he could still dig. So for those unfamiliar with the mechanics of dwarf tunneling, I shall endeavour to explain them as tastefully as possible. Like some members of the reptile family, dwarf males can unhinge their jaws, allowing them to ingest several kilos of earth a second. This material is processed by a super efficient metabolism, stripped of any useful materials and ejected at the other end, as it were. Charming. I mean, that's pretty gross, right? So Mulch gets sent over to Root, who tells him that he needs to tunnel into Fowl Manor, and Mulch does this in exchange for a massively reduced sentence in a minimum security prison. Good for him. So they want him to get into Fowl Manor, find out how Artemis knows so much about the fairies, and get Holly. So Mulch tells him that he can smell limestone and he's going to have trouble with that, but he's smarter than he looks and he finds a way in. Artemis is watching on his cameras and he notices something odd. So he sees Butler standing outside Holly's cell, but he should have been on his rounds. So Artemis gives him a call and asks what he's doing there. Shouldn't you be on your rounds? There was a pause. I am, Artemis, patrolling the main main landing, coming up on the safe room. I'm waving at you now. Artemis glanced at the landing cameras. Deserted, from every angle. Definitely no waving manservant. He studied the monitors, counting under his breath. There, every 10 seconds, a slight jump on every screen. A loop, he cried, jumping from his chair. They're feeding us a loop. Finally, the fairies got one up on Artemis. So he tells Juliet to go and check on Holly, and he gets Butler to the safe room where the book is. And he finds Mulch, who overpowers him. I won't tell you how he does it, but it's pretty gross, right? So Artemis looks back at Holly, though, who is slamming her bed up and down on the floor. And he realizes that she may have an acorn with her, and she is trying to break some of the flooring so that she can find ground to replenish her magic. And everything is in chaos now, and Artemis had been duped. There was indeed a small patch of earth poking through the cement. Holly fumbled the acorn from her boot, clasping it tightly in bloody fingers. I return you to the earth, she whispered, worming her fist into the tiny space, and claimed the gift that is my right. Nothing happened for a heartbeat, perhaps two. Then Holly felt the magic rush up her arm like a jolt from an electrified troll fence. The shock sent her spinning across the room. For a moment, the world swirled in a disconcerting kaleidoscope of color, but when it settled, Holly was no longer the defeated elf she had been. Juliet goes down to check on Holly, and Holly, back at her full power, is able to mesmerize her into giving her some information. And she convinces Juliet to remain in her cell while she leaves. So she's able to leave her cell, but not foul manner, right? You have to be very specific when you give fairies instructions. So Holly finds Mulch in the safe room and sees that he's found a copy of the book. Now, she knows where Artemis has been getting all of his information. And needless to say, Artemis is not thrilled by this turn of events. And time is running out, so to speak, because remember, time was stopped, right? And it's almost time for the fairies to detonate their bio bomb. And then Artemis figures is when he will drop his own bomb, figuratively. So Mulch is busy digging his way out of foul manner, and he doesn't want to go back to LEP because he knows that they're going to send him back to jail. So he comes up with a rather clever plan to make them think that he has perished in the mission. Foley, though, has his suspicions, but Mulch seems to have gotten away with it, and he's now a free dwarf, albeit on the lam, though. And in the meantime, Root has gotten two psychologists, right, to go over the negotiating interview he had with Artemis. And they both find something quite interesting. The human said we couldn't enter while he was alive, squeaked Cumulus. So, Argon took up the account. So, if we can't go in while he's alive, Root drew a sharp breath. Then we go in when he's dead. Cumulus and Argon beamed. Exactly, they said in perfect unison. Root scratched his chin. I don't know, we're on shaky ground here, legally. Not at all, argued Cumulus. It's elementary grammar. The humans specifically stated that entry was forbidden as long as he was alive. That's tantamount to an invitation when he's dead. The commander wasn't convinced. The invitation is implied at best. No, interrupted Foley. They're right. It's a strong case. Once Fowl is dead, the door is wide open. He said it himself. Did Artemis make a mistake? Gudgeon has been liaising with the Fairy Council, right, about what to do about Artemis. And he tells Root that they've given him permission to send a creature into the house. A troll. So the troll enters the house and there's this fight scene between Butler and the troll. Butler almost loses, but he comes out alive, right? But he's not doing well. And Juliet is of no help to him at this point because she was also involved in the fight. And who comes to his rescue? Captain Holly Short. Even she can't believe that she's helping Butler. So she heals him with her magic, and Butler then defeats the troll. But Holly stops him from doing any real damage, and they manage to get the troll out of the house. So Root and Foley are in shock now, right? No madman has ever defeated a troll before, and pretty much single-handedly as well. So after the troll incident, Artemis calls Root and tells him that any trust they had is now gone, and if they don't hand over the gold, he won't take Holly with him when he escapes the time stop, and she will be destroyed by the biobomb. So they think that he's bluffing again, because there's apparently no way to escape the time stop. But again, they forget who they're dealing with. So Artemis has been one step ahead of them all the way, and there's no saying that it's any different now. But Root is a bit hesitant, thank goodness, and he's not willing to put Holly's life at risk. So he tells Artemis that he'll have his gold, but Artemis doesn't believe him. So Artemis works out that the fairies have discovered his blunder, in inverted commas, where he said that no fairy will enter the manor while he is alive. So they're figuring that they'll give him the gold, biobomb the place, and then get the gold back after they've destroyed him. So even though Artemis has thought this through, even he's not 100% certain of his plan, right, if it's going to work. And remember, if it goes wrong, they all die, Butler and Juliet as well. And this is after he has given Butler his word that they'll all be okay, and Butler trusts him. So since Holly has escaped her cell, she's opened communications with Foley again. And he tells her that Root is on his way with the biobomb. And she feels bad because Juliet is an innocent child and she's going to die. So you can see that even though they don't technically like each other, they each have feeling for each other. I mean, like between the humans and the fairies, right? So Butler doesn't like keeping Holly captive now that she saved his life. Even Artemis felt bad about what he was putting her through. And Holly saved Butler, now she was worried about Juliet. So you see, right, that even though we're different, our basic humanity and feeling for another living thing connects us, right, even across species. So Holly confronts the three of them and she asks Artemis if he's told the other two about the bomb. So he says, yes, of course they know, but they'll be fine because everything is going according to the plan. But Holly is like incredulous and she looks at Butler, who tells her that he trusts Artemis, right, which is like a lot of trust to place in someone. And at this point, a trolley with a ransom that Artemis demanded has arrived at the door with Captain Root concealed on it. So Butler meets it and he says that everything seems to be fine. And Artemis can't believe that they actually paid, and neither can Holly, because fairies don't like parting with their gold. So Holly is shaken out of her gold fever, though, and she starts panicking again. There's still time, she said desperately. There must be something. I have magic. A crease of annoyance wrinkled the boy's brow. I hate to disappoint you, Captain, but there is absolutely nothing. Artemis paused, his gaze tugged momentarily upstairs to the converted loft. Perhaps, he thought, do I really need all this gold? And was his conscience not prickling him, leaching the sweetness from his victory? He shook himself. Stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. No emotion. Now, Captain, about your magic. What about it? Holly's eyes were hooded with suspicion. What would I have to do to buy a wish? Holly glanced at the trolley. Well, that depends. What do you have to bargain with? With minutes left to detonation, Foley and Root see some activity at the door of Fowl Manor, right? So Captain Holly Short is exiting with the gold. Well, like half of the gold, it seems. So she tries to convince Root that he shouldn't detonate the bomb because there are innocents in the house. But he won't listen, and he tells her that she has Stockholm Syndrome. That's a thing among fairies too, like apparently. You did what you could, Holly, he said. No one could have done more. You even retrieved most of the ransom. You're suffering from what humans call Stockholm Syndrome. You have bonded with your captors. Don't worry, it'll pass. But those people in there, they know about us. Nothing can save them now. Foley looked up from his calculations. Not true, technically. Welcome back, by the way. Holly couldn't spare even a second to return the greeting. What do you mean, not true? I'm fine, seeing as you asked. Foley, shouted Root and Holly in unison. Well, like the book says, if the madmen gold can gather in spite of magic or fairy glamour, then that gold is his to keep until he lies in eternal sleep. So if he lives, he wins. It's not that simple. Even the council will go against the book. Root scratched his chin. Should I be worried? Foley laughed mirthlessly. No, those guys are as good as dead. As good as isn't good enough. Is that an order? Affirmative, soldier. I'm not a soldier, said Foley and pressed the button. So Butler was shocked, actually, that Artemis gave back half of the gold. It seemed very out of character for him, but he said that he did it because he felt that he owed Holly something for what she did for him. So Butler and Juliet, like they have a drink to celebrate, a drugged drink with a sedative. By Artemis, by the way, drugged by Artemis. He drugged the drinks. Artemis watched his friends sink to the floor. A pity to deceive them, but if they had been alerted to the plan, their anxiety would have counteracted the sedative. He gazed at the bubbles swirling in his own glass. Time for the most audacious step in his scheme. With only the barest hint of hesitation, he swallowed the tranquilizer-laced champagne. As his thoughts began to swirl, it occurred to him that he might never awaken again. It's a bit late for doubts, he chided himself, and sank into unconsciousness. The biobomb is on its way to Fowl Manor, along a programmed flight path. No chance of a detour. Tense. the biobomb detonated. A blue orb of condensed light crackled and spread, filling every corner of the manor with its deadly rays. Flowers withered, insects shriveled, and fish died in their tanks. Not 1 cubic millimeter was spared. Artemis Fowl and his cohorts could not have escaped. It was impossible. And now the fairies suit up to go back in and collect the rest of their gold, right? That was the plan. So Holly steps into the house and she calls the rest of them to follow her, but she feels that something is wrong. Like the rest of the squad seem to be getting sick. So Foley tells her that they're having an extreme allergic reaction and that they can't enter the manor until Fowl is dead, which means... So Holly is able to re-enter the house because when she left, Artemis didn't tell her that she wasn't allowed to re-enter. So she was fine. But because he's still alive, the others aren't able to enter. They would only be allowed to enter if he was dead. So how did he survive? Butler asks him this question. Why did he drug them, and what if they had woken up? Ah, yes, excellent question. The heart of the matter. We wouldn't wake up. That is the nature of the time stop. Whatever your state of consciousness going in, that's how you stay. You can neither wake up nor fall asleep. You must have noticed the fatigue in your bones these last few hours, yet your mind would not let you sleep. Butler nodded. Things were getting clearer in a roundabout sort of way. So my theory was the only way to escape the time field was to simply fall asleep. Our own consciousness was all that kept us imprisoned. You risked an awful lot on that theory, Artemis. Not just a theory, we did have a test subject. Who? Ah, Angeline. Yes, my mother. Because of her narcotic-induced slumber, she moved with a natural order of time, unhindered by the time field. If she had not, I would have simply surrendered to the LEP and submitted to their mind wipe. So because we could not fall asleep naturally, I simply administered us all a dose of mother's pills. Simple. Very clever, isn't it? So the time stop wouldn't allow them to fall asleep naturally. So he forced their bodies to fall into sleep. And by doing so, he was able to escape the time stop and the biobomb. Because then remember, they would have been pushed forward into the future when the biobomb would have already detonated. Then they go and they check on Artemis's mother. And she's completely back to herself. She greets Artemis and she hugs him. And he's just like completely overcome. Hey? And this was what he asked of Holly, because remember he asked if he could make a wish and what it would cost him. And he wished that she would make his mother well. And I was really happy for him, right? Like, because in the end, you could see that he was just a lonely boy. And I'm really happy that he got his mother back, especially because he's lost his father. So this is the end of book 1, right, of the Artemis Fowl series. There's 8 of them, and I'm pretty keen on finishing them. So you can see, like, it's a fun, simple book, but there are some messages here, right? And the first one is that people aren't always what they seem. Artemis, like, initially, he seems pretty cold and calculating, but you see that he also really loves and misses his mother, and he feels bad for lying to Holly and his friends. Butler also, like, he's huge and he's scary, but he's loyal to Artemis. He loves his sister Juliet, and he's sensitive to Holly after she saved him, bound, like, by his code of honor. And another thing that we see is that greed comes with a cost, right? So Artemis initially wanted the fairy gold out of greed, but it came with losing his peace of mind and his innocence, and he realized that he didn't really enjoy manipulating Holly. And Artemis's character also shows us that we need to balance our intelligence with empathy for others. And Artemis starts off that way, but I think towards the end, we really start to see a change in him, which shows that he's able to grow. So another thing that's great about this book, right, is that it shows that female characters are strong as well. Holly is like really no damsel in distress, right? She's brave, she's smart, she's resourceful. She's the first female officer in her division, and she constantly has to prove herself to the men she works with, but she's more than capable of outshining them without much effort. And I think this is a good way to get younger boys to start reading. A young male protagonist who is too smart for his own good, with lots of action and adventure, right? So it is a middle school book, but remember he ages in the series, so I'm interested to see how that goes. I don't think that I will be reviewing each and every one of these books because there's quite a few of them, but I think that now that I've done the first one, I think that I will then do number 8. So I will review number 8 once I finish reading them. I'm currently on number 5. So these books are available in stores though, even though like it's quite an old series, but it's been around like for a while and they're still pretty popular. Even though like the technology in these books are like really outdated now, they do, the stories themselves, I think still, carry the weight. And they come as box sets. So if you can't find them in stores, then you'll like definitely find them online. So tell me, did your feelings about Artemis change at the end of the book? Do you think that he is capable of significant change? And that is all for this episode. And this is me, your host, Rizia, on the Books and Mortar podcast, where we talk about the books that build us. Until next time, goodbye.